Hello and welcome to episode 294 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, a new study says solar panels will spit out more energy than ever by 2050. In fact, twice as much, practically. Which is great because I will be putting out about half my current energy at that time, maybe even less. I mean, is decomposition a form of energy production?
Yes, I think it is. China is in talks with the European Union to remove tariffs on EVs and replace them with a minimum pricing scheme. Don't worry, we currently have no plans for a minimum price for this podcast, but our negotiations with the EU are ongoing.
Why not put giant wind turbines in the sky? Make them giant dirigibles with a turbine that catches all the air currents up at 4,000 feet and then run a wire to the ground. I apologize. I'm on muscle relaxants today. Wait. No, I'm being told by our imaginary producer that it's actually happening in China.
Wow. Homes in London are literally cracking under the weight of climate change. I am also cracking under the weight of climate change, and I'm currently podcasting while wearing a straitjacket.
All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, James, it's time to play Jeopardy.
Taking a spill 1,000.
A transit pipe rupture at BP's Prudhoe Bay facility in 2006 led to a 250,000-gallon oil spill from this 800-mile system. Mustafa.
What is the Deepwater Horizon?
No. Keegan or Abigail? That's the Trans-Alaska Pipeline.
Now, Brian, I have to admit, I was planning on playing the Jeopardy clip and stopping it and answering it.
Oh, yeah.
But then I did that in before the show, and I did not know the answer at all.
Yes, and that's the reason I decided to include this clip, because normally when I play a clip from Jeopardy, it's something about electric cars or, solar panels. The last week it was an electric ship. But this one I thought was interesting because there's so many different oil disasters
that we don't know about them.
That even smart Jeopardy people can't remember them all and cannot get the question right. And I didn't know the answer either.
Smart podcasters as well.
Yeah.
I maybe I knew about it at the time, but it's completely left my mind. It's not even ringing a bell.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Sure, some of our listeners remember. That's usually the way it is. Now, previously on the show, we mentioned a Canadian retail chain called PV Mart, and they were significant to us because they had kind of the first chargers for EVs. They were only level 2, but they were really welcomed when there was nothing else. And we were really appreciative of them. And we talked about them going away. Well, they're back. They're back. They sold the brand. Some organization or group of investors bought the brand and are reopening the locations. I doubt that they'll have chargers again, or maybe if some of the chargers are still there. But
yeah, I mean, they have been closed for like a year or so, maybe. And so as long as nobody removed the chargers, they might still be there at the locations.
Sure. They were probably Spirit Halloweens, and I'm not kidding. I think they were a lot of times Spirit Halloween stores.
I think, the size of those PV Mart stores is kind of perfect for a Spirit Halloween store.
Yeah. And they were kind of like an agricultural farming stuff, but there's always interesting things there for city boys like us to go check out from time to time.
Always weird things.
All those weird things, but yeah, the manager or the assistant manager always frowned at me when I used the EV charger and, criticized my parking, and it was just an ordeal, so I stopped doing it. But when I first got my EV, I thought, well, if I'm in that far end of the city, at least if I miscalculate and I need some juice, and I think I did one time, or thought I did.
Yeah.
But that's before I got used to my car and I realized just how far it can go and how you don't pull over to the side of the road when it's empty. There's lots left. Yeah,
but before there was anything else, there was literally a cross-country route of these level 2 chargers, and not all of them were at PV Marts, but before there was the Tesla charging network, it was technically possible to drive across the country because of these chargers.
So a company called Verge, I wanted to talk about this because we've discussed electric motorcycles on the show before, but one of the drawbacks of them is that they're kind of don't have great range because they're a motorcycle. They can't carry a huge battery like a car can. And they don't usually recharge fast. They don't have great recharging on those small batteries, so they were slow to charge. And it made sort of, tourism in a motorcycle kind of difficult. And we watched a show called The Long Way Up where Ewan McGregor and his motorcycle friend went up from the tip of South America to L.A.
Yeah.
on electric motorcycles when it was really early. They were prototypes, and they were serviced by prototype Rivian pickup trucks that were electric as well. They weren't on the market yet either. So it was kind of interesting for us. It was geek out time for us. It was on Apple TV, still is, of course. But now Verge has unveiled a 370-mile or 600-kilometer range electric motorcycle, and it uses a solid-state battery, which would mean that it would be the first solid-state battery to go into production of any kind for transportation. Mm-hmm. And it will add 300 kilometers of range in 10 minutes, which is about 3 hours of driving. So
yeah,
I've never ridden a motorcycle. I'd like to, but, common sense tells me, James, you make a big splat and don't do it. But
yeah,
and also I have children, even though they're adults, they like to have a daddy around. And but I like the idea because I like cycling, and cycling is a great way to be a tourist somewhere.
Yes.
And I would love to drive through the mountains somewhere on an electric, non-loud bike. But this is possible now.
Now, and I was saying recently, of course, I watched the newest season of the Ewan McGregor motorcycle show, and they went up through Scandinavia, and they were using gasoline motorcycles on this season, and they're older ones from the 70s. But at some point, they actually mentioned the range, and it was only like 100 or 150 miles.
Is that right?
So this range would be way better.
That's more than twice as much.
Motorcycle.
I don't understand. Now, is it because motorcyclists have to stop? Like, I don't know. Maybe people listening can tell me who know. But I assume your body can only take so much riding.
Yeah. And I think they're taking shorter trips on the Ewan McGregor show because those guys are getting into their late 50s or early 60s. And you don't typically want to go more than a couple hours, I think, without a bit of a break.
And of course, there's lots of gas stations around currently.
Yeah. So the fact that if the range is only 100 or 150, well, it's not generally a big deal because lots of gas stations.
But even around here, there are chargers every 150 kilometers usually, maybe a bit longer in a couple of cases, maybe a couple hundred. But that's still only a third of that range. And, you plug in, it'll be cheaper, a little cheaper motorcycling is going to be cheap anyway because it's only two wheels, but it'll be an interesting experience. Now, some people question safety, and we'll get to that later. The amount of noise involved in driving is in one of our letters later, but they do claim production of the solid-state battery in early 2026, which is right now, and big claims about that battery going into production. And Donut Lab is behind that battery. That story was on Electrek.
Yeah, this still has to actually come to fruition for us to see, but that is hugely promising. Safety is always an issue. Ewan McGregor did fall off his motorcycle at one point on the newest season.
Is that right?
He hit like the edge of the road or something and went over. He wasn't going too fast, so, he was fine, but it did damage the bike a little bit. And, it's no joke when you're up on two wheels.
Well, that happened to me at your provincial park where your cabin is.
Same kind of thing.
They paved it. There was like 2.5 inches of new pavement and a straight drop off.
Yeah.
And I dropped off, which was fine, but then the pedal hit the pavement on the left because it was raised up. James went down badly. And people wear your helmets because if it didn't save my life, it certainly saved about 30 or 40 points of IQ coming off for permanently.
Well, let's not go crazy. Maybe 5 or 10 points.
Well, there's not many points of IQ remaining, so you have to downgrade that, I suppose. But go ahead.
All right. From Reuters this week, China and the European Union are in talks to replace the tariffs with a minimum pricing framework. Now, this sounds like it's just a slightly different way of doing tariffs. Of course, in the European Union, they have introduced tariffs on Chinese EVs imported because they claim that there is unfair subsidies on them from the Chinese government, and that's probably true. And it was actually different depending on the manufacturer. They had different tariffs, the highest being about 35%. Well, they're in negotiations, and they're planning to replace this now with a minimum pricing scheme. And I didn't get quite entirely how it's going to work, but it's going to be based on every different model and configuration. So it kind of sounds like they maybe have to apply for permission to sell at a certain price because it's going to be different than straight across the board tariff.
So Beijing is pushing for this. This isn't the EU.
Yeah.
It's the Beijing is wanting this.
Yeah, and presumably they think they're going to get a better deal out of it, which is why they're pushing for it. It sounds slightly more complicated to me. Like I said, it's going to be, based on a minimum price for every configuration of every car. So perhaps a bit more complicated to introduce, but the goal is, of course, more Chinese EVs in Europe. And I think Europe is interested in that because there's not enough EVs in the market. And of course, the Chinese automakers are also investing heavily in Europe in different ways, including factories.
Right. And we'll have more on that later in the show. They are going quite quickly. The Canadian Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, is in China or on his way to China as we record this.
Yeah.
With the goal of negotiating, because they put, was it a ban or a huge tariff on our canola crops?
Yes.
Which we produce here on the Canadian plains.
A big tariff, I think. And yes, it was in retaliation because Canada, of course, has a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. We fell in line with what the U.S. was doing. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some movement on that if the Canadian Prime Minister is in China to negotiate.
So that's pitted Western farmers against Eastern Canada, where all the manufacturing and auto manufacturing is, against each other, and they have different interests. And, the auto manufacturers will, I hate to say it, but I'm for this.
Yeah.
Like it's a touchy thing, but the manufacturers, especially, they're pissing me off. They're, because of Trump weakening fuel economy standards, that they're, belaying their problems with their progress with EVs, their outlook for EVs. And so, this would be inevitable anyway, that they would be here in some way or another.
And of course, there's a path for the Chinese automakers to set up their own operations in every country, just like the Japanese did. Originally, that all the Japanese cars were imported from Japan, and then eventually they started setting up factories in North America. And, we're on a path where that may eventually happen for the Chinese automakers as well.
So Canada has offered, generous subsidies for factory building here for EVs and EV batteries. So we'll see if that happens for China. We'll find out probably. Maybe not on this trip, but it will set up the framework for, future negotiations. But it is an existential threat to the United States auto manufacturers, regardless, like some of them are leaving Canada because Trump wants them to, and they are actually doing that. So I guess all bets are off. And then once you have Chinese EVs, onshore in this continent, they're in Mexico. They're heavily in Mexico. In fact, they're too much in Mexico. Mexico's actually tariffing them now.
Yeah.
Because they do manufacture their own cars there. So we'll see how this pans out, but competition is good. I mean, they might be, by the time they get here, equally priced, but will be more model competition, and that's a good thing. Or they might be just a little bit cheaper, and they'll force the others to compete, which it will be a good thing for all of us who want to electrify our personal transportation. And who knows, maybe they can set up shops for buses, or although we do have Canadian bus manufacturing, electric bus manufacturing.
Yeah.
But the Chinese do it very well.
Yeah. And they wouldn't necessarily price those Chinese EVs as low as they do in China, because all they have to do is undercut the North American manufacturers, which, the prices are very high here. So they could perhaps make some healthy profits.
They have run into trouble when they're starting battery factories here and other kinds of factories. There's a good documentary, I think it was on Netflix a few years ago, about a Chinese company that tried to set up manufacturing, and the Americans, they were unionized or they were threatening unions. They were not the same sort of efficiency as the Chinese workers. There was huge cultural differences in the work. And was it an Obama produced documentary called The Factory? I'm not sure. But yeah, it was a cool documentary, and it showed the challenges of such things happening. And the fact that they can bring their automation here. They have great automation, robotics and such, and they know how to set up a factory very well. They own the supply chains for minerals, which is great when you want to mine the minerals, process the minerals, and then make the batteries for them. But how much of that is going to be done here? And we'll see what they negotiate. But I do know the automakers, the auto workers in Ontario, Canada, where it all happens, are going to be, because it's a big deal to our economy. It's a big deal to a lot of economies that have an auto sector. It's a big part of GDP. We'll see what happens. Brian, there's a new study from PV Magazine reported on it that 35% solar efficiency on solar modules and solar panels, by 2050. Now, we are sitting around, let's say 22% now.
Yeah, low 20s, and it creeps up very, very slowly, like 1% a year.
That 1% is, even 0.5% is huge when you have a big, solar farm in the desert that puts out as much as a nuclear reactor at midday. Like it's a huge thing to have a little bump up of 1% efficiency with the same panels, the same size, the same area. So, and it's a big deal on rooftops too, to have a lot more efficiency because rooftops are restricted, deserts not so much.
Yeah.
And other rural areas not so much either. But PV Magazine says that they talked to a global team of top solar researchers. They went around to all the different companies and researchers and said, hey, what do you expect to happen? What is the trajectory of things that are happening? And you know what shocks me? 2050 is only 24 years away.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which, Brian Stockton, is a quarter of the time that we've been on the podcast.
Wow.
So just 4 times that and we'll be at 2050. Well, some of us will.
Yeah.
I'll be rotting somewhere, probably the way things are going, but we'll see.
Yeah, but I'll be harvesting your decomposition for energy, so don't worry.
For energy, yes. And also maybe put my brain in a jar if you have the time.
I don't think that's worth it. It's not worth it.
A global team of top researchers says now that the world is entering a new era of multi-terawatt solar, meaning terawatt. That's a lot. That's a lot of energy. It sounds like a lot. If you don't know what it is, it's a lot. It's a million watts. Meaning solar power will be deployed at a massive world-changing scale, as if it isn't already.
Yeah.
Basically, these panels, there was like this theoretical limit of, 27, 28% efficiency, but they've also worked on ways of layering things. Like bifacial panels pick up reflectivity from the bottom.
Both sides.
And of course, if you add other layers like that, it costs money, but it's still just one panel. It's one panel to build a rack for. It's one panel to install. It's one panel to replace. Like these panels will last 40 years instead of 25 to 30 that they do now. So that cost, you add money to make it, and that becomes standard, and that through efficiencies and learning comes down in price. And suddenly these panels in 2050 will be way better than they are now. And the price per watt that they put out over their lifetime becomes incredibly cheap because they actually last longer. It's like batteries.
Yeah.
The cost per watt that they store and replace into the grid becomes cheaper if they last 25 years instead of 10 years or 8 years, which is what's happening now. So their findings come from an international workshop and a new paper published in Nature Energy. They expect solar panels to keep getting cheaper, more efficient, and more reliable, while also paying more attention to emissions, materials, and the recycling of it. So they're going to make them with less emissions, the manufacturing, and better materials and better recycling capabilities, which is 2050 plus 40. So we're talking about those panels in theoretical 2050 being, at the end of the century that they would have to be. I think they'll be able to do pretty much anything with recycling and solar panels. They're already getting good at it, and they're just starting.
Yeah.
Solar panel prices could fall by another 50% in the first half of the century. So they're expecting them to cost half as much per watt. And right now, it's unstoppable. It's proliferating around the world unstoppably because of the price. And now they're saying, well, it's going to be another 50% cheaper. So when you look at competing technologies, it's hard to argue for some things like nuclear in all cases and as the only solution when the batteries are getting better, the solar's getting better, the prices are dropping like crazy. It's certainly, if you can argue about nuclear, but you could certainly say that all fossil fuels cannot compete, period.
No.
There's just no way.
Yeah, the fuel cost for solar is zero.
The higher efficiency is seen as more important than lower cost because it means less land and fewer materials are needed for the same amount of electricity, as I said. And that means that more people, my roof, was made, 7 years ago or something, like 18, 19% or 20% efficiency panels. Well, if I double that, then that's great because then the future owner of this house has a small roof, but they'll be able to get a lot more energy out of that area. So it'll be a lot sexier of a proposition for them to actually do that at the time.
Yeah, if I replaced my solar panels now, I could probably get them like 25% more efficient. And if I wait till 2050, almost twice as efficient.
Which would be a big deal for not using land to get solar, to get energy. So they're expected to last more than 40 years. New technologies could help diversify global solar manufacturing, bringing in more countries and companies. So that's good because China is dominating right now, and only China, for the most part, at least percentage-wise. Researchers say managing long-term reliability and degradation will be critical, especially for newer technologies like perovskites, which I always have trouble saying.
Yeah.
But yes, that is the problem with that technology, that new solar technology that's been developing for over 10 years now, is it doesn't last long necessarily.
Yeah,
they're finding ways to do it,
but this new technology is moving so quickly. 2050, as you say, not that far away. I have confidence. I think that these figures sound right to me.
So global solar manufacturing capacity could reach around 3 terawatts by 2050. So yeah, that energy goes up when you electrify transportation and home heating, and manufacturing, but still, that is a lot. That's an annual capacity. It's incredible. Anyway.
All right, moving on. This is from Energy Storage News. Grid storage batteries are rapidly expanding in the UK. So back in 2024, the government in the UK released Clean Power 2030 Action Plan. And one of the big items on their action plan was way more grid storage batteries. And this is happening. So the whole grid storage capacity grew by 45% in 2025. So 4 gigawatt hours were added. Total capacity, 12.9 gigawatt hours. So yeah, that's amazing. 45% growth in 2025. It was 53% in 2024. And, they have a fairly free market for electricity in the UK. And so companies are hopping on this. They're seeing it as a huge opportunity to get in early, and the expansion is going great.
And I don't know what it is about the UK grid with batteries, but it's happening faster than other parts of the world. There are probably some technical reasons for that, but I do know they have a lot more solar than we do.
Yep.
And a lot more wind.
Yeah, and we know that they've now shut down all their coal plants, and of course, those are often that sort of base load power. And when you have less of that base load power, then batteries are a great way to make up for your base load power.
I know a lot of people don't believe in batteries, but it's happening.
Yeah,
and it's when sodium-ion batteries come online, and they are cheaper, less energy dense, but great for grid storage. They'll become even cheaper than lithium batteries, and that will take off even greater.
Solar and batteries both dropping quickly in price. Okay, moving on. The story is from Bloomberg, and this is also in the UK. London homes are cracking apart because of the clay soil and climate change. So
we have clay soil here.
Yeah.
Where you and I live. It's a former lake bed from prehistoric times or something. I don't know, but if you don't know what clay soil is, your soil is clay.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Tried planting a garden in clay.
No, often referred to as gumbo, which, by the way, was the Wordle word for today. I don't know if you're
kidding.
Yeah, I don't know if you're keeping up with the Wordle.
I'm not, but my family is.
Yeah, well, spoilers. This won't release maybe until tomorrow, so no spoilers on the Wordle. But
well, the Patreoners are going to get it. They're going to be disappointed in you, Brian. You spoiled the Wordle. The joy that some people have in their whole day is Wordle, and you spoiled it.
Oh, well, what are you going to do? But yeah, there's many reasons I wanted to talk about this story, but that is, of course, one of them. Our city is also on clay soil. And what that means is there's a lot of expansion and contraction. When there's moisture, it expands, and when it's dry, it contracts. And their problem in London this past summer, and this is the other reason I wanted to talk about it. I was there this past summer. They had a huge heat wave, summer of 2025 in London, and things were super dry. I walked through the park in London, and the grass was brown. It was dry and hot. And of course, they have always had that problem of clay soil, but it's now exacerbated because of climate change. And so there's houses, many of them worth many millions of pounds. There was a couple of neighborhoods specifically that they mentioned in the article with very expensive homes, and the ground just shifted more than usual this past summer, and a lot of homes had huge cracks in them. There's a couple of pictures in the story. it's the pictures in the story are bigger than the cracks I see in my house. Mine tend to be a little on the small side. But yeah, my house has shifted a lot since it was built in 1962. My house really could use a whole new basement. People often do that around here because the basements really shift and crack apart. The floor in my basement in my home theater is extremely slanted, but we've just kind of made the decision to, live with it for now. But, eventually...
Just no roller skating down there.
Yeah, no roller skating. But, eventually it would be nice to lift the house and sort of fix the basement or something like that. But yeah, the city's vulnerability stems from its clay-rich soil, thirsty trees, and many Victorian and Edwardian homes built on shallow foundations. Those risks are now being exacerbated by global warming, and that's due, according to the British Geological Survey. That was the other thing about my house. We had a giant blue spruce tree in the front yard, and we cut that down because we felt like it was probably making the problem worse, sucking up all the moisture from the front yard of the house. And
I think that's kind of unique to us. I mean, it affects other soils as well, but it affects us greater. So people do say to remove trees that have root systems that approach the foundation.
Yeah, and you hate to cut down such a it was a really huge tree, and we have
no natural trees in the city where we live.
Yeah, so
it is always a shame to cut down any tree.
Yeah, but a tree that big just shouldn't have been planted in the first place. Like, they would have planted it in 1962 and may not have known how big it was going to get. Now there's more information about what are good trees to plant near homes, and people I think are a bit more careful about it. And, we've replaced it with a tree that's not going to get anywhere near as big and so forth. But yeah, this is called subsidence is what this phenomena is. You're shifting and cracking home. And the estimate is that well over 1 million London properties will be at risk of this by 2030 as temperatures rise. So, yeah, I did not know that London has the same problem we do.
I wonder if their soil is from the river covering a greater area at some time in history, and that is the sediment from the river. For us, it was a prehistoric lake bed or seabed where we live. And, you go... Like, I would take my bike just north of the city, and the soil changes. If you go a few kilometers north, then suddenly everything's changed. And I've got friends who live, just outside the city in some of the smaller towns, and they got a great soil.
Yeah.
But not here.
Yeah.
Not here. So, both my houses have not had basements. They've both been built in crawl spaces for partial of that reason. But we get really cold here, so generally you're digging down 6 feet anyway. So they thought, well, why not just put in a basement?
Yeah, I don't know. We probably shouldn't have basements around here. Our cottage that we're planning to build will not have a basement, and we're going to build it on concrete.
It can't, though. It couldn't if it wanted to, could it? Do your neighbors there have basements in their
I think it's
mansions?
Possible that some of them do, but yeah, you're a bit too close to the water for probably wanting a basement. But the solution for this is to put in concrete piles. And so the cottage is going to be built on several of these concrete piles that are going to go on 20 feet or more. And if you can get your piles big enough and plentiful enough and deep enough, then hopefully your house doesn't shift and move around.
So when I bought this house, the floors were uneven. They still are a little bit. And I had a basement guy come in, and he threw his lasers down in the crawl space. And he said, you got 20-foot piles in the center of the house, and the rest of it is sinking. But the piles are not, because they're 20 feet deep. So that was my issue, and there was only so much they could do, so they did a little bit. And but that's interesting. So you would go 20 feet down. I always thought your cottage was like on a rocky place, but it's probably sediment then, from lakes.
So, and definitely some clay out there as well.
So it'll sit on top of that. Does your architect, how do they come up with this? Do they know the soil in the area? Do they go out there and dig? I mean, how does he?
Yeah, we had to do a technical survey, which I may have mentioned on the podcast. Somebody, an engineering firm, went out there and they dug core samples, basically down 20 feet or more.
I don't want to ask how much that cost. That sounds expensive.
Yeah,
to me.
It was basically essential, though. Like, you can't build the cottage without it. We hope that maybe our neighbors, like, they had built a cottage recently, and if they had done one and they still had it, we could have used theirs, but they couldn't find one. So we had to do it ourselves.
That's too bad. So yeah, that's interesting though. So you're building, remember, if you're new to the show, Brian is attempting to build a rammed earth cottage. And his architect is learning about rammed earth construction. And he actually came out to your house and built a wall. What would you call that? It's by a ramp to your front door.
We needed new front steps for our house, and we thought we would put in a ramp, which is a bit more accessible and easier for everybody. And we did it by building a rammed earth wall, and then the ramp sits behind the rammed earth wall. And he actually came out recently, a few weeks ago, and put in a handrail. We didn't originally have a handrail with it. So he did some iron work and added a handrail to the rammed earth wall, which is great.
So, Brian, it's time to dip into the mailbag. We have a letter here from Chelsea. This is from Chelsea. Hello, I've been listening to the show and love you guys, especially the Air Quality Awakening. I moved from Aurora, Colorado to Racine. Did I say that right? Racine, Wisconsin, which is downwind of the Oak Creek coal power plant, and I could taste the difference in the air, which is never good. I've been on an air quality journey of my own, and it's been nice to hear you getting jacked up about the lack of care for our air by anyone but people who suffer. I believe there should be an air particulates counter in the corner of every news broadcast. I agree. Certainly in the foremost page of the weather, which is hidden here, like they had for the volume of oil spilled in the Gulf during the Gulf spill when that was happening. Anyway, I'm writing to enlighten you to the idea of driving while deaf. It is a common misconception that people unable to hear means that you're less safe driving. This is a myth. I started studying ASL, American Sign Language, and for the degree, you're required to take a deaf culture course. Statistics show that deaf people are actually safer drivers. I'm not surprised by that. This is due to the more ardent attention paid to the road, more experience with spatial awareness, and fewer audio distractions. Totally makes sense to me. I had to get that off my chest because I'm tired of you guys saying that doesn't that risk your safety? Because I don't know. How deep into the archives did you go, Chelsea? Because I don't remember this. I vaguely remember talking about it. Headphones and cars or something like that. It wasn't too long ago.
We were talking about headphones and riding bicycles, and I said that I sometimes use my earbuds, but they have a transparency mode. So I try to only have one in, and it's on transparency mode, and that feels fairly safe because you still get most of the sound through them.
When you talk about, here it goes. When you talk about impairing hearing with earbuds or whatever while driving on a motorcycle or bike, guess what? Deaf people ride motorcycles and ride bikes. Now you know. All the love, Chelsea Valentine. Now, my neighbor Sean is deaf. My next door neighbor Sean is deaf. Now, he has tried to run me over a couple times because I did accidentally soak him with a garden hose once. And when you hear a deaf person screaming, it's terrible because all you hear is a screaming. They don't say words, to tell you what's going on. And I don't know ASL. So, certainly beyond that, I've never crossed my mind that he wouldn't be a safe driver. And it totally makes sense that deaf person would be, with spatial awareness and less audio distractions, better driver.
Yeah, well, I like the idea of less audio distractions. Like one of my pet peeves when driving is you're driving and, there's somebody in the passenger seat and they just realize they forgot something at home and they'll suddenly go, oh, and, it makes you think, what? Am I going to run into something? Like,
yeah.
And
been there.
If you were deaf, you wouldn't have to deal with that.
No. That's happened to me in a big way a couple of times.
Yeah.
There. But you know what, Brian? I think there's a law against wearing headphones here where we live.
I Googled it before the show, and there's no specific law,
really,
according to Google, for wearing headphones on bicycles, but it is strongly recommended by SGI that you don't wear headphones on a bicycle.
Okay, SGI is our government auto insurance here. So when they banned the use of cell phones and devices in cars, so I had just gone out, was at Costco, they had like a $20, one of those early things that douchebags and stockbrokers wear all the time. Bluetooth thing in your ear that looks ridiculous now. Some of our listeners probably have one. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. But you can't use those. They said you cannot use those. The police put out a statement saying that is against the law.
Yeah.
So you can't even have one on one ear. So I wouldn't assume that you would have headphones on both ears.
Well, and my understanding of the law is you just can't be holding your phone. You can have it in a holder. And then
but you can't touch it. So if you touch your ear.
Yeah.
Well, this is nuance. It's probably different where you live, our listeners. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good point, and I certainly didn't assume for 1 second that deaf people couldn't drive better than us, so then better than hearing-abled people. But that's interesting. When I come home from the gym, I have my headphones on to the gym, and I listen to music or podcasts, and I tend to take them off when I get to the car because it's just weird for me. I'm just not used to it, and it's like, I can't drive without a seatbelt on because that's where was what I did with driver training when I was 16 because you had to. And now I feel naked or like on a fly out at any point of when I'm backing out of the car, so the seatbelt has to be on and I feel like I have to hear. Although, what am I hearing? Really, other than distractions, probably. So, yeah. But then I'm not spatially aware as a deaf person. I'm the opposite. I'm probably due for an accident one of these days as I get older.
Okay, we have another letter here. This is from Richard regarding our bonus episode last week, and this is a bit of a summary of the letter. Richard explained that while Tesla appears to sell the same few models year after year, it improves them continuously rather than waiting for periodic model refreshes like other North American automakers. By tracking vehicles and rapidly implementing fixes and efficiencies, similar to Toyota's production philosophies, Tesla's built at different times can be meaningfully different under the skin, despite looking the same, although there was a visual refresh as well recently. For both.
But it's subtle, Brian.
Yeah, it's fairly subtle.
If you're driving on the street, if you're an actual consumer of cars, you would say that they look the same. Now, I appreciate that visual improvement because you have to keep them kind of the same for aerodynamics to keep them efficient and have long driving range for any electric car usually. But I totally agree with what Richard is saying. Like, that is the great thing about Tesla cars. Some other people are doing that. Does Rivian have over-the-air updates? These are software updates that come to the car.
I think so. Yeah.
So it's not as you're getting self-driving software updates now, which are significant. But you used to wake up to new features, like for a long time they didn't have automatic rain sensors on them, and then suddenly you had that. So yeah, they are improving things in the car.
Yeah, there is more of those things coming. Like, it wasn't that long ago. Like, now when you put on the turn signal, you get the video display of your side cameras. And like, once they did that, it was like, oh, this is crazy. Why didn't they do this like 3 years ago? Like, this should have been priority number one. Yeah. That was that might have been the best update ever. And I was in someone else's car the other day, and there was no camera for changing lanes. And I just was freaked out. It's like, oh my God, how can you change lanes without the camera view?
Of course, automakers now would prefer not to have side view mirrors, but regulators, especially at least in the United States and Canada, are not allowing that just yet. But it removes the aerodynamic and especially the noise problem in electric vehicles. They make a lot of noise with the air hitting them. So it'd be nice just to have a camera there and to look at a monitor. Monitors have improved. The video monitors are more like real life and they can actually, in dark situations, see better because, the cameras, the sensitivity on the cameras. So, but I do wonder about the new potential customers looking at Teslas and seeing just Teslas around. You in high adoption areas like Colorado, Vancouver, places like that, you see them everywhere. And do you want to differentiate yourself?
Yeah.
When there's to me, and this is a crazy thing. Even smart people or Tesla experts had trouble identifying the Model 3. Was it an S? Did I see an S? Did I see the first Model 3 on my road? They kind of look the same. And even the X, people who own Teslas might yell at me, but it's hard to tell the difference between an X and a Y sometimes, and a Y and a 3. And they kind of all look the same. That's their brand. But when there gets to be a lot of them on the road, do you want a more mix of cars? And certainly the competition is achieving that as far as, the actual models.
I'm a car person, so I've always been able to tell the difference, but I know that other people can't. And my partner will say, oh, is that a Y? And I'll say, no, that's an X, and so forth. But I'm also sensitive to that differentiation thing because I've always enjoyed it when I've had a slightly kind of different looking car. I drove a Nissan Cube, and that was amazing because not only was it unusual looking, but it was not very popular and hardly anybody had one. So I'm sensitive to that, but it's the full self-driving software updates that are really the major thing in the Tesla right now. And that's the thing that I couldn't live without. Like the fact that it really can drive itself now 99.9% of the time. And there's updates still coming. So like that's the biggest improvement that's happening right now.
So what happens is the car software updates via your Wi-Fi, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Wi-Fi?
Yep.
Does it use Wi-Fi? It gets the software. It sits in your driveway or garage, and it'll update overnight, like your phone might, and it'll have more features. And they do that on a fairly regular basis. And with other cars, you have to, basically, they're not getting updated. And if there is a problem, you have to take it to the dealer, and it's a big ordeal.
Yeah.
So I'm a big OTA, over-the-air updates are great.
Yeah.
And more automakers are doing them.
Yeah. It is happening. It is more common, but software is the thing that especially the legacy automakers often struggle with.
Well, here's a fact. The average price of a new vehicle sold in America last year was $49,000 US. Half the cars sold in China last year were priced under $22,000 US. Half.
Wow.
The BYD Seagull starts at under $10,000. That's a small, compact car that most Americans wouldn't want to be seen dead in, but still, in other parts of the world, popular. And it would be nice to have that option here. It'd be nice to have the option of a good priced pickup truck that wasn't crazy expensive to buy or looked like the Cybertruck, which is, well, it's polarizing. And I've only seen one or two around here.
Yeah.
People went and bought them, but then they sold them.
Yeah, and I like unusual looking cars, so the styling is not a problem for me.
All right. Well, contact us if you like. Please email cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Even if you think that I think something I don't actually think, I'd like to hear from you. Think that. We want to know what you're thinking so we can clear it up and then you can stop hating us. You can also leave us a voicemail online at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
And I will save your brain in a jar so I can know what you're thinking in the future.
Okay. Just hook us a USB drive up to it or something. I don't know.
The Clean Energy Show is an independent podcast, and it is made possible by our listeners that support us on Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. You can support us for as little as $1, and you can get some ad-free episodes, early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes material, private updates, verbal shout-outs on our audio podcast, and we really do appreciate it.
Coming up next, the lightning round. Time for the lightning round!
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
The El Presidente of the United States is now saying that China makes a lot of windmills for suckers like the United States, but is not able to find any being used in all of China.
Interesting.
Smart guy, this guy.
Yeah.
For one thing, okay, they're not windmills. They're not windmills. Windmills are a different thing. It's a wind turbine. Windmills mill. They mill grains into flour. And usually you don't need to do that nowadays. You have wind turbines providing electricity to your factory to mill that flour without a big blade on top. CNN's Canadian-born fact-checker Daniel Dale says, in reality, China is by far the world's biggest user of wind power and is installing more wind capacity very fast. Thanks for listening to the show, Danielle, because you obviously know what's going on. China today produces enough electricity from wind alone to power 53% of the United States.
Wow.
Just from wind.
That is a crazy statistic.
But I guess Donnie looked around China somehow and didn't see any wind turbines, but there you go. PV Magazine says sodium-ion battery cells are already near cost parity with lithium batteries, even though they're just been on the market for a couple of years, barely. By 2050, 24 years from now, sodium-ion batteries with fast learning rates could deliver storage at 11 to 14 euros per megawatt hour, cheaper than lithium-ion at 16 to 25. So they'll be cheaper by that much, okay? While also offering higher energy to power ratios. So they'll be able to store a lot and spit it out really fast.
Yeah.
Better than lithium. And a high cycle durability, which means they'll last a long, long time, which means they'll be cheaper. The Kremlin earned over $8.4 billion from the European Union in 2025 via exported Russian liquefied natural gas. This comes despite Brussels' promise to completely ban Russian LNG by 2027. The world's tallest vertical farm opens in import-reliant Singapore. Vertical farms are indoor farms where plants, lettuce, things like that are placed vertically up high. Well, this one's the highest one. Highest one now, 23 meters high. It cost $80 million. The facility developed by Singaporean company Green Phyto Pte Limited was launched despite other operators struggling with rising costs and the government lowering targets for domestic agricultural production. This is a good fit for Singapore because there's obviously no farmland. It's a city-state.
Yeah.
And I love vertical farming, but it has struggled on cost. So somebody is going to figure this out. Somebody's going to figure out automation or a better way to do it. Because I love the fact that, when you go to the store and buy some lettuce, you could get E. coli poisoning. I don't like that risk. You go to a restaurant and I like the fact that it's clean, that it's pesticide free because there's no need to, worry about bugs indoors. They can deal with that indoors. It's great. Do you like indoor farming?
Yeah. And, we've talked about it from the early days of the podcast, and there's always been a few examples, but no, it hasn't really taken off like I thought it would. It seemed like a no-brainer, like just make a high rise that can supply food to the city that it's built in. But we'll see if Singapore can figure this out. They've got some very interesting architecture in Singapore. They're very good at building, tall towers, and they've got lots of great buildings there. So maybe they're the ones to figure it out.
So Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company, the Dyson guy who runs it, he has a strawberry indoor farm.
Yeah.
Basically a greenhouse that's automated, and he's figured it out. He's figured out that's in the UK.
Yeah. Seems
to work fine. Watched a documentary on that. Yeah, a string of closures in recent years has underlined how high-tech agriculture is far from being a definitive solution for the island's food security. Still, Singapore is betting that size and automation can make it profitable. I hope somebody figures this out so it spreads around the world.
Yeah.
We still, I get a lot of lettuce now from greenhouses. You even replant the pod, which we've done. You eat the lettuce from the pod and then you stick the stalk back in the ground. It grows, it's a little more bitter each time, but it grows back, and you can do that 2 or 3 times. Well, it's time for the tweet of the week. I haven't had this in a while. This is from school shooting survivor David Hogg. He says on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. So I'm calling it Twitter. It's pretty ironic to deny the existence of climate change, but insist we have to invade Greenland as soon as possible because of new sea routes and access to minerals opening up because of the melting of the ice caps. So yes, the United States is on one hand denying climate change, but also saying we need Greenland, which is going to be open to Russian and Chinese shipping routes and security issues up there. BYD, the Chinese car company, announces a new slew of long-range plug-in hybrids. This is getting crazy, Brian. Plug-in hybrids is a car that's an EV, and then it has a gas backup engine that goes beyond that when you want to take those trips. Now, when we first had them, they were, 25 kilometers range, 30 kilometers range. Then they got up to 50, and we thought, maybe that's kind of usable. Well, now they have the version of the Seal 06 and Seal 05, the Quinn Plus, the Quinn L DMI. They will have a 210 battery-only range, which 210 kilometers, which who doesn't that work for?
Yeah.
I mean, that's most people. And then you go on vacation, or if you run into trouble, you have that backup if you want to do it. The weird part, though, the total range is 2,110 kilometers combined. Like they're putting on a big fat ass gas tank on there.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't want to fill up your gas in 5 minutes.
Yeah, well,
I don't understand that.
I guess you just fill up the gas tank, only when you're going on vacation. Yeah, otherwise your gas would probably get stale in there. Gas actually, goes bad after a year or so.
Goes bad, yeah.
Which is
if you've got 21 or 1,800 kilometers of range in your gas tank, and it's sitting there and you're carrying it around, that's kind of dumb.
Is that like from here to Vancouver? Like that's an insane distance.
It is, and it's crazy, and you don't need that. And I if I did go from here to Vancouver, I don't think I would fill it up, so I didn't have to. I think it would be smarter to have less weight.
Yeah,
more efficient to have half of the tank and then fill it up once or twice. Yeah. So, but you would only need to charge once or twice a week. And it also goes from 30 to 80% of a charge in 20 minutes, which is fairly fast. And I think I saw one, I was reading about one that had like 400 kilometers of BEV range, or 370 rather. And which is almost as much as my Chevy Bolt has in its entirety. And it works for me. And I do even take that on long trips. So, I don't know why they're doing that. I know competition is insane in China and they're trying to differentiate themselves, but that's crazy. So the brain surgeons in the United States government think oil is still shipping in barrels, like the Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know how far back do you have to go to get there.
Although we always talk about the price of oil in barrels.
That's how it's measured, yes, because that's one day was how it was shipped. But now they put them in giant tankers and let them float around. A senior administration official, this is on CNN, speaking under condition of anonymity because they're an idiot, told CNN that the oil has already been produced and put in barrels in Venezuela. It's been put into barrels, according to them. The majority of it is currently on boats, and these barrels are on boats, these oil barrels, these fictional oil barrels, and going to the U.S. Gulf to be refined, which is, none of that is actually true. China's EV growth, they are around 12.9 million new energy vehicles sold in 2025, which is up only 18%, but that's kind of around the point where that's an okay adoption increase. So we're talking hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and battery electric vehicles. The market share hit 54%, though, of new car sales. That's up from 48% the year before in 2024. EVs are now mainstream. Once they get beyond 50%, they're mainstream, replacing ICE pretty much at scale. And China is selling more EVs than the rest of the world combined. We mentioned that on the show a lot, but it's an amazing fact. BYD now sells twice as many cars in Germany as Tesla does. And Tesla has a factory in Germany, which apparently is not at capacity or anywhere, maybe even 50% capacity. Waymo robotaxis in the United States will now use some Chinese-made Zeekr minivans. That's a brand of Chinese vehicles. And they have a minivan version. I think they showed it off at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show that happens every year, January in Las Vegas. No steering wheel or pedals, Brian. But because of the regulations in the United States, that means they're restricted to 25 units per year, 2,500 units per year. So, but it has true 5-person seating, which is the opposite of the Tesla robotaxi. I believe it's still a 2-seater, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the plan,
the robotaxi is a 2-seater. And I've always said, well, I don't know if they have stats on this from Uber or Uber or what, but it's not always just one or two people taking a robotaxi. It's, if you want to completely get rid of cars, you need to take the whole family to the, I want to say, bowling alley.
Yeah.
Because it's the 1950s in my head right now.
Yeah, they can always, but I mean, the Tesla robotaxis right now are Model Ys, which, can theoretically seat 4, although nobody sits in the driver's seat. But also the idea is that once robotaxis are common, they'll be cheaper. So if you need to seat more than 2, just order more than 2.
So yeah, they were there showing off, the Waymo was. They're 6th generation hardware now. This is the hardware that makes it self-drive. So it has 13 cameras, 6 radars, and 4 LiDARs. I believe 1 in every corner. So that is that's overkill. It's completely different than what Tesla does. Tesla is just using cameras. And it has heaters and wipers and sprayers for sensors to keep them clean. Now, this is something that I will predict that Tesla will have to do if they have a robotaxi operation, that it's going to be too much of a hassle to have to stop if your camera gets dirty. And right now where we live, it's melting snow, messy as hell.
It's an issue, constantly. And we always have to wipe the one on the rear. You can still do the self-driving when the cameras are dirty, but if they get too dirty, it gets mad at you. You could theoretically stop your robotaxi.
Does it shout at you? Does it belittle you? What does it do?
No, it'll just at a certain point, it'll shut off if it can't read from the cameras. But I presumably in the future, they'll just have built-in washers for all the cameras.
Man, it's time for a CES Fast Fact. Global investment in clean tech far outpaced what went into polluting industries. For every $1 funding fossil fuel projects in the world last year, $2, twice as much went to clean power, according to the ECIU. For China, the EU and the US and India, the 4 largest polluters, it was $2.60 for clean energy funding compared to dirty energy funding of just $1. That's from Bloomberg. Here's another one from Waymo being at CES at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas last week or so. It showed off its version of the Hyundai robotaxi, which they're also deploying now. Because they've been using Jaguar I-Paces, which is an electric SUV from England. The Ioniq 5 costs just $42,000 with all the Waymo doohickeys on it, according to CNBC, which is quite cheap and quite surprising, actually, if that is true. So, yeah, they're deploying a variety of vehicles, which I think you will need. I think it's more efficient to have a robotaxi-sized car with one or two people if that's what your market is, but also have some around because people want to get groceries and maybe even bring home some IKEA stuff or something. That's going to be a thing if everyone gives up their cars one day. The Hawaii State Energy Office, this is nuclear news, Brian, where you're doing some nuclear news. The Hawaii State Energy Office has released the final report of the Nuclear Energy Working Group. The report concludes that nuclear power is not viable in Hawaii and that the state should not change its laws or constitution to enable it. The most fundamental obstacle is legal. Hawaii's constitution restricts nuclear fission, construction, and nuclear power is excluded from the state's renewable portfolio standard. So it's all in their laws. They say no fission, so that includes modern reactors and modern small reactors. This is from The Guardian. Climate heating emissions from aviation could be slashed in half without reducing passenger journeys by getting rid of premium seats, which I can't afford. I can't afford a regular seat. I maybe can't afford the space of a regular seat the way they're going, but ensuring flights are near full and using the most efficient aircraft, according to analysis. There's some aircraft that is a lot more efficient than other aircraft, and they're usually the mid-size or smaller aircraft than the bigger ones.
Yeah, and I love to complain about the Canadian airlines because they're generally pretty terrible, but there's Porter is a smaller airline in Canada, and my understanding is, I've never flown Porter, but they don't have a business class. They have all the seats are the same, and they just have slightly more leg room than economy flights.
Oh.
Yeah, so instead of doing premium seats, they just give everybody good seats.
Now, I always thought Porter was practically 100% business class because everyone taking them would be from the Toronto Island Airport, which is in downtown Toronto, and they would be going to Ottawa or Montreal.
Maybe, but
usually
they've expanded a lot since then. They fly now out of Saskatoon.
All right. Oh, they do. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, these efficiency measures that they're talking about here could be far more effective in tackling the fast-growing carbon footprint of flying than pledges to use sustainable fuels or controversial carbon offsets, the researchers said. And finally this week, Brian, I thought this was fake. Are you looking at this picture here?
Yeah.
It looks like an AI-generated thing, like it's not real, but it is a large dirigible with almost looks like a rocket ship floating in the sky. It's quite freaky and surreal.
Yeah.
This is from Futurism.com. Chinese energy company Linyi Yuan, a video shared earlier this week by Chinese journalist Li Ziying, captured a massive airborne wind turbine dominating the skyline over China's Sichuan province. Wind turbines that float to harness high-altitude winds are being used in China, they write. The Global Times has identified it as a SAWES S2000, reporting that the unit successfully completed a test flight on Monday. It's said to be the world's first megawatt-class high-altitude wind power system designed for urban deployment, with a maximum power output of 3 megawatts on a floating wind turbine. This particular S2000 was only airborne for 30 minutes, but it generated 385 kilowatt hours of electricity, reaching an altitude of around 6,500 feet in this case.
Wow.
And that means the wire was 6,500 feet long down to the grid. It wasn't up for very long. It did connect to the local power grid, according to the GT, Global Times, a world first for AWTs. In September, the team successfully flew an earlier unit, which has a generated capacity of 1.2 megawatts. Now, I don't know, this particular blip is said to be about the size of a basketball court and as tall as a 13-story building in the sky.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe Chinese people are used to this in their country, but I'd poop my pants if I saw one of these in the sky over our city. I was thinking, it's up. We're being invaded. The Brian's bomb shelter immediately. Going to hide in there. Bring a can of beans with me. It was the first turbine of its kind to generate a full megawatt of power, which is achieved during its maiden voyage. It is potentially producing up to 10 times more energy up there with 40% less material at 30% lower costs. It could be quickly deployed to supply emergency power after disasters, which is what I see it being used for. I don't see putting up wind turbines floating, because it seems like they could become detached.
Yeah, and of course, you have to worry about airplane traffic and everything, not just hitting the blimp itself, but hitting the cable underneath it that, is a very long cable.
So someone should send this to Trump, because I think this would be hard to miss if he's going to China and says there's no wind turbines. Well, they're floating up. You just got to look up, buddy. That's our show.
Yeah, that's it for this week. Please find us on social media, Clean Energy Pod, patreon.com/cleanenergypod, by email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and remember to subscribe on your podcast app.
So yeah, join us over at Patreon. That is where our website is. We post things there. Some of it is behind a paywall for the people who support our show, but generally our social media posts are there as well. Patreon.com/cleanenergypod. We hope you'll support us. Thanks to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard and Brent Rotley, who get a shout out every week. Thank you for supporting our podcast, and we'll see you again in 7.
See you next week.